I'm Sam, and I want to share a story that changed my life. Growing up in a small town, I had a dream that seemed too big for my world. Ever since I could remember, I wanted to work in Hollywood, not as an actor, but behind the scenes, editing, filming, creating magic from behind the camera. I loved the idea of bringing stories to life. I would spend hours watching movies, imagining that one day I would be the person editing those scenes or adjusting the camera to get the perfect shot. But there was one big problem that stood in the way of my dream. I didn't speak English well enough. Sure, I knew a few basic words like hello and thank you, but when it came to having a real conversation, I froze. I felt like every word was a challenge, and no matter how hard I tried, the sentences in my mind never came out right. The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became. How could I ever work in Hollywood if I couldn't even speak the language? I knew that filmmakers from all over the world spoke English, and I had to master it if I wanted to work with them. But how? I had tried learning before, taking classes, watching videos, but nothing seemed to work. Every time I tried to speak, my nerves took over and I would stumble over my words. The mysterious teacher. One evening, after another failed attempt at speaking English with a friend, I felt like giving up. I went home, sat on my bed, and thought, maybe this dream is too big for me. But then something unexpected happened. I got a message from a friend who had been in a similar situation. He told me about someone who could help, a teacher who wasn't like the others. Her name is Mrs. Green, he said, but some people call her the language whisperer. I laughed. It sounded too good to be true. A teacher with a nickname like that. What's so special about her? I asked. She doesn't just teach English, she unlocks something inside you. She knows the secrets to becoming fluent quickly, my friend replied. Curious, I decided to contact her. When I met Mrs. Green for the first time, she wasn't what I expected. She didn't look like a typical teacher. No big textbooks, no strict rules. Instead, she had a calm, almost mysterious presence. She smiled warmly and said, Sam, I know why you're here. You want to learn English not just for speaking, but for your dream. Her words surprised me. It felt like she knew me before I even said a word. How could she understand my dream so well? The first lesson, confidence over perfection. Mrs. Green told me that learning English wasn't just about memorizing grammar or vocabulary. Many people think they need to be perfect to speak English fluently, she said, but that's where they're wrong. Fluency doesn't come from perfection, it comes from confidence. She gave me my first task. Speak English every day, no matter what. Even if you make mistakes, keep speaking. Don't worry about being perfect. I was nervous. I wasn't used to speaking English, especially not in public, but I decided to give it a try. The next morning, I went to the local cafe and stood in line to order coffee. I practiced in my head over and over. I'd like a cup of coffee, please. When it was finally my turn, my heart raced. I opened my mouth and said, I'd like a cup of coffee, please. The barista looked confused for a moment, but then she smiled and said, one coffee coming right up. We both laughed, and I realized that making mistakes wasn't the end of the world. It was just part of the process. From that day, I spoke English every chance I got. With my friends, at work, even when I was alone, I would practice. Sometimes it was funny. One time, I told my friend I was bored when I meant to say I was tired. He looked at me strangely, and we both laughed when I realized my mistake. But something amazing was happening. The more I spoke, the more comfortable I became. The words started coming more easily, and I stopped worrying so much about being perfect. Mrs. Green's first secret was working. The struggles and the second secret. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were still days when I felt like I wasn't making any progress. One day at work, I had to give a short presentation in English. I thought I was ready, but when I stood in front of everyone, my mind went blank. My palms were sweaty, and I could feel my face getting hot. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out right. I stumbled through the presentation, and afterward I felt embarrassed and defeated. That evening, I went to Mrs. Green's house for my lesson. I told her what had happened and how I felt like I had failed. She looked at me calmly and said, "Sam, failure is part of the journey. In fact, it's the second secret to fluency. Don't be afraid to fail." I was confused. "But failing makes me feel like I'm not good enough," I said. She nodded. "I understand, but think about it this way. Every time you make a mistake, you learn something new. You only truly fail when you stop trying." Her words stuck with me. I realized that every mistake I made was teaching me something. Slowly, I stopped being so hard on myself. When I made a mistake, I would laugh, learn from it, and move on. Funny moments on the way. As I continued learning, there were some funny and unforgettable moments. One day, I was in a job interview for a small film project. I was nervous, but determined to speak English the whole time. Everything was going well until the interviewer asked how I felt about the position. I wanted to say, "I'm very excited," but instead I said, "I'm very exited." The interviewer looked puzzled for a second, then he smiled and said, "Well, I hope you're not planning to leave just yet." We both laughed, and I realized that even in a professional setting, mistakes weren't the end of the world. Another time, I was practicing with a friend and tried to say, "I love editing videos," but instead I said, "I love eating videos." We both burst out laughing, and I couldn't stop thinking about how strange that sounded. But moments like these made learning English fun, and I learned to enjoy the journey. The third secret: believe in yourself. As time went on, my confidence grew, and I felt ready for something big. Then, one day, it happened. I received an email from a small production company in Los Angeles. They had seen some of my editing work online and wanted to interview me for a project. I couldn't believe it. This was my chance. But then reality hit me. The interview would be in English. My heart raced as I thought about all the ways I could mess up. I went to Mrs. Green and told her the news. She smiled, as always, and gave me the third and final secret: believe in yourself. "It's normal to feel nervous, Sam," she said, "but remember, you've worked hard and you're ready. You don't need to be perfect. Just show them who you are and speak from the heart." On the day of the interview, I was shaking. I sat in front of the camera, facing the team in Los Angeles through a video call. I took a deep breath and began speaking. At first, I was careful with every word, but then I remembered Mrs. Green's words: "Speak with confidence." I relaxed and spoke more naturally. I made a few mistakes, but I didn't let them stop me. The team listened carefully, and by the end of the interview, I felt like I had done my best. A few days later, I got a phone call. "Sam, we'd like to welcome you to the team," they said. I couldn't believe it. I had done it. I was going to Hollywood. Looking back, Now, as I look back, I realize how important those three secrets were. Speak every day, even if you make mistakes. Don't be afraid to fail. Believe in yourself. These simple lessons not only help me learn English, but also help me achieve my dream. Today, I'm working on films in Los Angeles, and every day I get to do what I love. My journey wasn't easy, but it was worth every challenge. And if you're learning English, remember, if I can do it, so can you.